Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. It's one more time. It's up to you to like and share our research. So before we even get started today, I want you to share this video, share the link, neighborhoodnewsstudio.com, with a family member, with a friend. Spread truth journalism as far as we can. We got a great lineup ahead of us today. We got John OLoughlin, Macduff Lives, doing a reading of Behold a Pale Horse by Bill Cooper. We got Research Roadshow with George Webb coming on at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. At 2 p.m., Housatonic Live. 4 p.m., Mark Buckley and John Wilkins for Neighborhood News Hour. And at 5 p.m., Are You Battle Ready with Dr. Linda Lee Tarver. All right, ladies and gentlemen and fellow patriots around the globe, I'm kicking it over to Mr. John OLoughlin, Macduff Lives. John, take it away.
All right, fellow patriots, and welcome to Macduff Lives here at Neighborhood News Studio. Welcome and happy Monday morning to everybody. Starting a new book today. Actually, it's not a new book. It's just a book I haven't used on the show before, but one of the most important books to those of us who are trying to see behind the curtain. It's Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. Before I start, I want to say I just don't have enough time to read all the important parts of The True Flag by Stephen Kinzer. I commend it to you. I may get back to it, but don't bet on it. I've just got too much else on my plate. But from The True Flag, please note I do have 5 portions of it on my playlist, not on my playlist, on my YouTube channels, and that's important stuff. That part of the book really blew my mind, and I hope it helps everybody to understand where the empire, American empire, that we are suffering under right now, where it got started. And the best answer that I've seen is in the first 2 or 3 chapters of this book, The True Flag, by Stephen Kinzer. All right. Yeah. Barbara Kay, you're practicing your chord progressions. That's great. You know, I need somebody to come and play chords on the guitar for me when I play fiddle. I played guitar for a lot of fiddle players, and now I really want to play the fiddle more. But nobody down here really that either can or wants to. So come on over to Mystery Island, and we'll have some tunes, Barbara. Of course, I don't know what you play. What do you play? Oh, you're a newbie. Okay, cool. And who else is here? Frank W. is here. All signs that mean to an end. Yep. All right. Well, forgive me for not mentioning everybody, Corky, today. And all right, it is the guitar. Good. All right, so let me get into my subject because I'm going to need 2 days for this. I blocked out today and tomorrow to go over this portion of the book. If you haven't got a Screaming Ospreys coffee mug yet, you're missing a great experience. You can get one at screamingospreys.com if you just go to the shop there. All right, yeah, as you can see there, there's the book. There's my website, and scroll down a little bit, and you'll see the shop, so you can get your mug there. The next thing you see is my little Screaming Ospreys TV, which is an archive of some of my favorite and best shows. You can scroll through that at your leisure. I haven't got a T-shirt yet, but I might get one. All right, let's get into the book. First of all, oh, Corky, you got your mug. Superb. Yeah, it is a beautiful cover. Now, there's so much to talk about with William Cooper, but what I really want to do is just start into silent weapons for quiet wars, which I had not understood to have been a an actual whistleblower's dump, which somehow ended up in Cooper's hands. But if this is the legend or the story behind it is true, then this actually represents the agenda of the first Bilderberg group meeting in 1950, 54, I think he says. So that's the basis on which I think I want to give this book a start with some credibility. Okay. So of course, one of the first things that happens to a whistleblower is the attack ad hominem. And all you have to do is go to Wikipedia and look at Bill Cooper's Wikipedia page, and you'll see that it's full of ad hominem attacks at him and the things that he says and anybody that believes him. It's a war against William Cooper. It's an ad hominem war, which means that they're not attacking what he says. They're just calling him a conspiracy theorist. And he believes he's talking about at least extraterrestrial life and a number of other things, which I do not want to get diverted onto right now. But just that's the summary is don't listen. This show is not about trying to establish the credibility of Milton William Cooper. This is about the content of his book. Okay, so I want to share what I'm reading with you so you can actually see it or possibly share it with someone else. And so I am going to go to my little share button and open up the tab and share this so I can share it on the screen and hopefully big enough that it's useful to you if you want to share it with other people. Okay, so I'm just going to go over to that page and start reading it as I say. I'm going to skip through the preface and the preface because I want to get into the meat of the book and spend our time doing that. Top Secret Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, Operational Research Technical Manual, TMSW 7905.1. Welcome aboard. This publication marks the 25th anniversary of the Third World War, called the Quiet War, being conducted using subjective biological warfare, fought with, quote, silent weapons. This book contains an introductory description of this war, its strategies, and its weaponry. Okay, May 1979, the 25th anniversary of the Third World War. So count back to that, you get to 1954, which is the date of that Bilderberg meeting. Okay. Security. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of a society. The automation of a society, that is the imposition of technological controls and systems, i.e. the engineering of social automation systems, parentheses, silent weapons, on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, i.e. slavery and genocide. It's impossible to discuss the automation of the society without discussing or implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life. Okay, social control, slavery, and destruction of human life, genocide. So this manual is in itself an analog declaration of intent. Such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny. So don't look at this. Don't let anybody see it. Otherwise, it might be recognized as a technically formal declaration of domestic war. Furthermore, whenever a person or groups of persons in a position of great power and without full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodologies for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic war exists between said person or group of persons and the public. The solution of today's problems requires an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no agonizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. You have qualified for this project because of your ability to look at human society with cold objectivity, and yet analyze and discuss your observations and conclusions with others of similar intellectual capacity without the loss of discretion or humility. Such virtues are exercised in your own best interest. Do not deviate from them. Now, I offer to you at this point the first page of my book about my dad, Macduff Lives, in which I quote Bertrand Russell, in which he refers to people who are admitted into this secret that was just described in this manual that I just read. So here's Bertrand Russell. On those rare occasions when a boy or girl has passed the age at which it is usual to determine social status, shows such marked ability as to seem the intellectual equal of the rulers, a difficult situation will arise requiring serious consideration. If the youth is content to abandon his previous associates and to throw in his lot wholeheartedly with the rulers, he may, after suitable tests, be promoted. But if he shows any regrettable solidarity with his previous associates, the rulers will reluctantly conclude that there is nothing to be done with him except to send him to the lethal chamber before his ill-disciplined intelligence has had time to spread revolt. This will be a painful duty to the rulers, but I think they will not shrink from performing it. Quote unquote Bertrand Russell in his book, The Scientific Outlook. And that right there, that I believe is my dad's story in brief. They thought that they could recruit him, and he simply was a dog that would not hunt in their little hunt club. So that's what I'm talking about here is if you are allowed into their secret group, then if you don't do what they say, you're screwed. And that means you're going to die. Historical introduction. Silent weapon technology, okay, we still haven't defined that, but let's let him do it, has evolved from operations research, OR, a strategic and tactical methodology developed under the military management in England during World War II. Okay, this is, now you're getting back towards England, well, Tavistock, right? The original purpose of operations research was to study the strategic and tactical problems of air and land defense with the objective of effective use of limited military resources against foreign enemies, i.e., logistics. It was soon recognized by those in positions of power that the same methods might be useful for totally controlling a society, but better tools were necessary. So what you see is the mind has created a system for effective use of limited resources within the war. With, we have only so many planes, we have so much fuel, we have so many trains, we have so many boxcars. How do we most efficiently use those to mobilize and produce the best war machine? Well, the next paragraph says that people in power said, whoa, we don't have to limit this to war. We could do this to the whole country after the war's over and just run everything. back to the quote though, but better tools were necessary. Social engineering, parentheses, the analysis and automation of a society, requires the correlation of great amounts of constantly changing economic information, data, so a high-speed computerized data processing system was necessary, which could race ahead of the society and predict when society would arrive for capitulation. Ooh, that sounds like Isaac Asimov and his foundation and the use of the uh, elite scientific minds to create this idea called psychohistory, where they could predict based on past human behavior when the next crisis was going to come. This is exactly the same idea that Asimov projects into our minds in Foundation, in my opinion. Excuse me a second. Relay computers were too slow, but the electronic computer, invented in 1946, filled the bill. The next breakthrough was the development of the simplex method of linear programming by the mathematician George Dantzig. Then in 1948, the transistor promised great expansion of the computer field by reducing space and power requirements. With these three inventions under their direction, those in positions of power strongly suspected that it was possible for them to control the whole world with the push of a button. Immediately, the Rockefeller Foundation, well, who else, right? And, isn't it, doesn't this resonate true when you see that it's the Rockefeller Foundation that gets into this with the money? Okay, by making a 4-year grant to Harvard College, funding the Harvard Economic Research Project for the study of the structure of the American economy. 1 year later, in 1949, the United States Air Force joined in. Okay, now understand from my point of view, the Air Force is allied with these deep state people and keeping things secret. Well, let's not get off talking about the Air Force. Anyway, it makes sense to me that the Air Force would be the one that would join into this to provide, the technical and military aspect of it. In 1952, the grant period terminated, and a high-level meeting of the elite was held to determine the next phase of social operations research. The Harvard Project had been very fruitful, and as is borne out by the publication of some of its results in 1953, suggesting the feasibility of economic, i.e., social engineering. And then he gives a quote of a book, Studies in the Structure of the American Economy, copyright 1953 by Wassily Leontief, International Science Press, Inc., White Plains, New York. Now, Leontief is a very important man in this. He is a Russian, but he was one of the people that was working on this social engineering stuff before the war. On the Soviet side, and came over to the American side. I haven't studied his life to know the details, but he's now working supposedly for the American side when he publishes these results in 1953. He was the guy that got the 4-year grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. So you can see where it all comes from. Engineered in the last half of the decade of the 1940s, the new quiet war machine stood, so to speak, in sparkling gold-plated hardware on the showroom floor by 1954. With the creation of the maser in 1954, the promise of unlocking unlimited sources of fusion atomic energy from the heavy hydrogen in seawater and the consequent availability of unlimited social power was a possibility only decades away. All right, footnote. I have not gone back to see what a maser is. I can't remember what it was, and whether any of this idea of fusion atomic energy has any validity to it, I don't know. Maybe Corky knows. Maybe we could ask the LaRouche people who are always talking about it, but I am not the person to validate or invalidate that idea. So let's just leave it out for purposes of our consideration this morning and continue with the rest of the text. The combination was irresistible. The quiet war was quietly declared by the international elite at a meeting in 1954. Although the silent weapons system was nearly exposed 13 years later, the evolution of the new weapon system has never suffered any major setbacks. This volume marks the 25th anniversary of the beginning of the Quiet War. Already, this domestic war has had many victories on many fronts throughout the world. Political introduction. In 1954, it was well recognized by those in positions of authority that it was only a matter of time, only a few decades, before the general public would be able to grasp and upset the cradle of power. For the very elements of the new silent weapon technology were as accessible for a public utopia as they were for providing a private utopia. The issue of primary concern, that of dominance, revolved around the subject of the energy sciences. Okay, you've heard it before that, the future is energy. Of course, Tesla says vibration or frequency, but energy. And sorry, I don't have it handy, but I usually have at hand a copy of um, my George F. Kennan book that I've had ever since I was in college at William and Mary in 1973 and 4, studying American political philosophy and politics, and that contains within it, some of the George F. Kennan stuff. But you could see that George F. Kennan is the predecessor of Henry Kissinger, and the idea that we are going to have to be cruel to most of the world in order to create the good society that we're envisioning in the future. That means we're going to have to be willing to do things that are unthinkable. And that's what we're talking about here, is the unthinkable. How can you join this club unless you realize that you're going to have to face human slavery and human genocide? That's what the club is going to be doing, have to do, and for the 25 years before 1979 has been doing. Because they don't want a public utopia, right? They want a private utopia. Because we're not ready. We're not smart enough. We're still savages in their minds. Servants, serfs, people to be blown up in combat, or to have our minds destroyed in social engineering projects. Energy is recognized as the key to all activity on Earth. Natural science is the study of the sources and control of natural energy, and social science, theoretically expressed as economics, is the study of the sources and control of social energy. Both are bookkeeping systems, mathematics. Therefore, mathematics is the primary energy science, and the bookkeeper can be king if the public can be kept ignorant of the methodology of the bookkeeping. You follow how that tracks the idea of a gambling and playing the odds. The bookkeeper can be king as long as the public doesn't see the way the game is rigged. All science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge. The end is control. Beyond this remains only one issue: who will be the beneficiary? In 1954, this was the issue of primary concern. Although the so-called moral issues were raised in view of the law of natural selection, it was agreed that a nation or world of people who will not use their intelligence are no better than animals who do not have intelligence. Such people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by choice and by consent. Okay, see, if you didn't join the New World Order, then you are just a stake on the table. Think about it. Consequently, in the interest of future world order, peace, and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public, with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural and social energy, that is, the wealth, of the undisciplined and irresponsible into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, and worthy few. Wait a minute, what? A quiet war against the American public to take all the wealth out of those of us that are undisciplined and irresponsible? Which, by definition, is anybody that hasn't signed up for their New World Order program. That makes us undisciplined and irresponsible, right? Yeah. You might add lazy, I mean, this is somebody that just wants to kick back and live off the fat of the land. I mean, what kind of a life is that? You should be working. So the beneficiaries of this can't possibly be these undisciplined, lazy bums that are not with the program. The only beneficiaries should be us, the elites. The nerve of these people, but this is how they rationalize their guilt. Consequently, in the interest of future world order, okay, I read that. In order to implement this objective, it was necessary to create, secure, and apply new weapons, which, as it turned out, were a class of weapons so subtle and sophisticated in their principle of operation and public appearance as to earn for themselves the name silent weapons. In conclusion, the objective of economic research as conducted by the magnates of capital, that is the banks, and the industries of commodities, goods, and services, is the establishment of an economy which is totally predictable and manipulatable. That's what I just said. That's Asimov. That's saying we're going to use our massive knowledge of psychology, psychohistory, and data. And, this is why we've had to have, these constantly increasing powerful computers, because the goal is to get to the point where they can have enough data on everybody for their alleged powers, their psychohistory powers, to actually be real. And then to manipulate us, including just get rid of us at will. In order to achieve a totally predictable economy, the low-class elements of society must be brought under total control, i.e., must be housebroken, trained, and assigned a yoke and long-term social duties from a very early age before they have an opportunity to question the propriety of the matter. In order to achieve such conformity, the lower class family unit must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and the establishment of government-operated daycare centers for the occupationally orphaned children. It's diabolical. The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest sort, so that the moat of ignorance, isolating the inferior class from the superior class, is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. In other words, we're going to be kept so stupid that we can't see through the fog that separates us from the truth. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. Once again, there's, you know, your man, Russell, Bertie Russell. Yeah. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measure of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. Descriptive introduction of the silent weapon. Everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creators, but only in its manner of functioning. It shoots situations instead of bullets, propelled by data processing instead of chemical reaction, originating from bits of data instead of grains of gunpowder, from a computer instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer instead of a marksman, under the orders of a banking magnate instead of a military general. I ask you, is this not where we're at now? You know, whether I can trace the source of this document, whether you believe Bill Cooper, whether you believe the text that is included in the introduction here or not, it fits what's happening. It fits. It makes no obvious explosive noises, causes no obvious physical or mental injuries, and does not obviously interfere with anyone's daily social life. Yet it makes an unmistakable noise, causes unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with the social life. That is, unmistakable to a trained observer, one who knows what to look for. The public cannot comprehend this weapon and therefore cannot believe that they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but that is because of the technical nature of the silent weapon. They cannot express their feeling in a rational way or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they do not know how to cry for help and do not know how to associate with others to defend themselves against it. When a silent weapon is applied, gradually the public adjusts, adapts to its presence, and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, psychological via economic, becomes too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. You take away the father, you break up a brother and sister, you destroy the family. It's necessary in order to keep the slaves under control. You force both parents to work. You get hold of the kids. You teach the kids to be submissive, obedient workers. It's a silent weapon, but it kills. And it takes away the vitality of the individuals. You know, to take my dad away, it takes away my confidence, my self understanding of who I am. You know, before I am old enough to form my own person, I've been deprived of the one role model that has shaped my life. And this is happening to individuals all over the country, all over the world, all the time. These attacks are not just with guns or poison darts. They're attacks on our support system, our friendships, our isolating us, depressing us, making us susceptible to the next whatever that comes along. Theoretical introduction. Give me control over a nation's currency, and I care not who makes its laws. So says Meyer Amschel Rothschild, whose dates are 1743 to 1812. It's good to know that. Know those dates. He dies on the year of the beginning of the War of 1812. Today's silent weapons technology is an outgrowth of a simple idea discovered, succinctly expressed, and effectively applied by the quoted Mr. Meyer Amschel Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild, as we'll call him now, discovered the missing passive component of economic theory, known as economic inductance. He, of course, did not think of his discovery in these 20th century terms, and to be sure, mathematical analysis had to wait for the Second Industrial Revolution, the rise of the theory of mechanics and electronics, and finally, the invention of the electronic computer before it could be effectively applied in the control of the world economy. General energy concepts. In the study of energy systems, there always appear to be three elementary concepts. These are potential energy, kinetic energy, and energy dissipation. And corresponding to these concepts, there are three idealized, essentially pure physical counterparts called passive components. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of potential energy is associated with a physical property called elasticity or stiffness and can be represented by a stretched spring. In electronic science, potential energy is stored in a capacitor instead of a spring. This property is called capacitance instead of elasticity. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of kinetic energy is associated with a physical property called inertia or mass and can be represented by a mass or flywheel in motion. In electronic science, kinetic energy is stored in an inductor, parentheses in a magnetic field, instead of a mass. This property is called inductance instead of inertia. 3. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of energy dissipation is associated with a physical property called friction or resistance and can be represented by a dashpot or other device which converts energy into heat. In electronic science, dissipation of energy is performed by an element called either a resistor or a conductor, the term resistor being the one generally used to describe a more ideal device, for instance, a wire, employed to convey electronic energy efficiently from one location to another. The property of a resistance or conductor is measured as either resistance or conductance reciprocals. Okay, now we got through the hard part. Okay, well, there's more hard part, but we're not going to try to tackle all of this theoretical physics, okay? But we are going to try to grasp the main concepts, okay? Because it's applied to economics. This science is the idea. This is the silent weapon, so we have to try to understand it. In economics, these three energy concepts are associated with one economic capacitance, capital, parentheses, money, stock, inventory, investments in buildings and durables, etc. Okay, we can understand that. Capacitance is capital. That's some energy that's stored up. Economic conductance is goods. That is production flow coefficients. Okay. In economic inductance services, the influence of the population of industry on output. Okay. That I can't tell you I understand. It's still working on it, but let's keep reading because I think he helps us in the next paragraph. All of the mathematical theory developed in the study of one energy system, for instance, mechanics, electronics, can be immediately applied in the study of any other energy system, for instance, economics. And this is the theory. Mr. Rothschild's energy discovery. What Mr. Rothschild had discovered was the basic principle of power, influence, and control over people as applied to economics. That principle is, quote, when you assume the appearance of power, people soon give it to you, unquote. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency or deposit loan accounts had the required appearance of power that could be used to induce people, parentheses, inductance with people corresponding to a magnetic field, into surrendering their real wealth in exchange for a promise of greater wealth, parentheses, instead of real compensation. They would put up real collateral in exchange for a loan of promissory notes. Mr. Rothschild found that he could issue more notes than he had backing for, so as long as he had someone's stock of gold as a persuader to show his customers. Mr. Rothschild loaned his promissory notes to individuals and to governments. These would create overconfidence. Then he would make money scarce, tighten control of the system, and collect the collateral through the obligation of contracts. Of course, that means the security interest that your car will get repoed if you don't pay the loan. The cycle was then repeated. These pressures could be used to ignite a war. Then he would control the availability of currency to determine who would win the war. That government which agreed to give him control of its economic system got his support. Okay, you're in a war. You're going to lose unless you have some more money. I will give you some money as long as you let me run your economy when the war's over. Well, I guess I don't have any choice. Okay, well then, England, Britain, we have a deal. Pardon me. Collection of debts was guaranteed by the economic aid to the enemy of the debtor. The profit derived from this economic method. You see how that works, right? You know, if you owe money to Rothschild and you're not paying it, then the enemy, Rothschild gives some money to the enemy. He attacks you until you pay it. Sounds like the mafia to me. The profit derived from this economic methodology made Mr. Rothschild all the more able to expand his wealth. He found that the public greed would allow currency to be printed by government order beyond its limits. Hello? Is that what's going on right now? I think it is. Hello? Inflation, backing in precious metals or the production of goods and services. Apparent capital as a paper inductor. In this structure, credit presented as a pure element called currency has the appearance of capital, but is in effect negative capital. Hence, it has the appearance of service, but in fact indebtedness or debt, is in fact indebtedness or debt. It is therefore an economic inductance instead of an economic capacitance. This Ezra Pound has written about this, and this is an important concept. It's so hard. An economic inductance, that means it's going to suck the energy out of you. Whereas an economic capacitance would mean that it it's capital. It has value of its own, like a building or a solid investment. So we look at this currency, this paper money, as capital. We think it's like money, but it's not. It's an inductance. It's something that is used to suck our real wealth out of us in exchange for the appearance of wealth in the form of pieces of paper that on their face are worth more than the collateral we gave for it. Hang on. Oh, sorry, that was potential spam. Pardon me. Okay, now we're getting to some important stuff. It is therefore an economic inductance instead of an economic capacitance, and if balanced in no other way, will be balanced by the negation of population. Parentheses, war, genocide. The total goods and services represent real capital called the gross national product, and currency may be printed up to this level and still represent economic capacitance, but currency printed beyond this level is subtractive, represents the introduction of economic inductance, and constitutes notes of indebtedness. War is therefore the balancing of the system. By killing the true creditors, that is the public, which we have taught to exchange true value for inflated currency, and falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and regeneration of those resources. In other words, this is like the Phoenix program, ab ordo chaos, ab ordo ab chaos. It's the Phoenix system, and it means, in our times right now, it means world war. It means more destruction through war. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency gave him the power to rearrange the economic structure to his own advantage, to shift economic inductance to those economic positions which would encourage the greatest economic instability and oscillation. Oscillation, okay? The final key to economic control had to wait until there was sufficient data. They need more data, guys. That's what we're here for, is to give them data. As Mark Kulak says, they just really want us, all of us, living in a glass box with wires hooked up to us, watching video games. Data and high-speed computing equipment to keep close watch on the economic oscillations created by price shocking and excess paper energy credits, that is paper inductance / inflation. Breakthrough. The aviation field provided the greatest evolution in economic engineering by way of the mathematical theory of shock testing. In this process, a projectile is fired from an airframe on the ground, and the impulse of the recoil is monitored by vibration transducers connected to the airframe and wired to chart recorders. By studying the echoes or reflections of the recoil impulse in the airframe, it is possible to discover critical vibrations in the structure of the airframe, which either vibrations of the engine or aeolian vibrations of the wings, aeolian just means the air, or a combination of the two, might reinforce, resulting in a resonant self-destruction of the airframe in flight as an aircraft. Resonant self-destruction. You've heard about the bridges, right? That they built, and if a body of people, like a marching regiment, marches across in a certain rhythm, that it creates a standing wave, and that standing wave will oscillate and get worse, and then the bridge will ultimately fall. And you're talking about this is going to happen in airplanes. If one of those resonant self-destruction frequencies isn't stopped, So that's why they had to test it, to make sure that when they're flying these planes and firing these guns, The recoil isn't going to create a vibration that's going to destroy the plane. Well, application in economics. To use this method of airframe shock testing in economic engineering, the prices of commodities are shocked. Oh, would you like to have some insulin today? Well, it's cost more than it did yesterday. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. There's a supply chain problem. Supply chain. It's it. Supply chain problems. All right, we have supply chain problems here in the insulin department. Oh, we have to raise it up to 10 times the original price. Oh, people aren't going to like that. Well, that's unfortunate, but we have to do our shock testing to see what's going to happen, so that when we really do this, are they going to get the pitchforks and the torches, or will we just fudge it over with a cute story on the evening news? Shock testing. The resulting echoes of the economic shock are interpreted theoretically by computers, and the psychoeconomic structure, remember psychohistory, Asimov, structure of the economy is thus discovered. It is by this process that the, quote, partial differential and difference matrices are discovered that define the family household and make possible its evaluation as an economic industry. Then the response of the household to future shocks can be predicted and manipulated, and society becomes a well-regulated animal with its reins under the control of a sophisticated computer-regulated social energy bookkeeping system. Eventually, every individual element of the structure comes under computer control through a knowledge of personal preferences, such knowledge guaranteed by computer association of consumer preferences, parentheses, universal product code, zebra striped pricing codes on packages, with identified consumers identified via association with the use of a credit card, and later a permanent, quote, tattooed body number, invisible under normal ambient illumination. Okay, he's predicting the nanoparticle personal ID system that is talked about now as potentially part of what we call the jabs. Summary: economics is only a social extension of a natural energy system. It also has three passive components. Because of the distribution of wealth and the lack of communication and lack of data, this field has been the last energy field for which a knowledge of these passive components has been developed. Since energy is the key to all activity on the face of the earth, it follows that in order to attain a monopoly of energy, raw materials, goods, and services, and to establish a world system of slave labor. Well, wait a minute. You really want to do that? Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. It is necessary to have a first strike capability in the field of economics. In order to maintain our position, it is necessary that we have absolute first knowledge of the science of control over all economic factors and the first experience at engineering the world economy. In order to achieve such sovereignty, okay? They want sovereignty over us. They want sovereignty to forget about nation states, forget about the Peace of Westphalia, forget about the UN. It's all going to be them when they finally have completed their plans. Sovereignty. We must at least achieve this one end, that the public will not make either the logical or mathematical connection between economics and the other energy sciences, or learn to apply such knowledge. This is becoming increasingly difficult to control because more and more businesses are making demands on their computer programmers to create and apply mathematical models for them, for the management of those businesses. It is only a matter of time before the new breed of private programmer economists will catch on to the far-reaching implications of the work begun at Harvard in 1948. The speed with which they can communicate their warning to the public will largely depend upon how effective we have been at controlling the media, subverting education, and keeping the public distracted with matters of no real importance. Well, yeah, baby formula. How about, the Supreme Court leak? All of these things are situations that they use as weapons in their war against us, to enslave us. And that's what I got today. So tomorrow, we'll get more into Bill Cooper himself, but I wanted to get that introduction into everybody's thinking process because this, to me, I think is the answer. Is where's all this coming from? The way it all seems to emanate through the Rockefeller Foundation is so consistent with all the other creepiness that we're facing. And Cooper, he was there. He really did have a lot of inside information. So I'm grateful to Mr. Bill Cooper for writing this book. Urge you to get a copy of it. We can talk about it more tomorrow at 11 a.m. And I will turn it back over to Andy in the studio. Thanks very much, everybody, and stay tuned here at Neighborhood News Studio for George Webb Research Roadshow at noon.
Uh, All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you one more time to John O'Loughlin, Macduff Lives, for your reading of Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. We look forward to the continuation of that reading tomorrow and the upcoming days. Make sure our audience, not only do you go to neighborhoodnewsstudio.com to catch up on all of our citizen journalist content, you got to go to Macduff's own website, screamingaspreys.com. Dig into his video archive. He has a bunch of fun readings, a bunch of investigational work he's done, and a lot of great interviews as well. So screamingaspreys.com. We are switching gears here, ladies and gentlemen. So everyone on the Macduff Lives channels on YouTube, we're saying goodbye. Make sure you go to neighborhoodnewsstudio.com to catch up with George Webb and Research Roadshow coming up here shortly. Just give me a moment as I do the little switcheroo here on the old